At the beginning of the movie, we meet a family who has traveled to the Caribbean Sea to celebrate their son Ben's birthday. Everything seems to be going smoothly. Ben's mother, Julian, decides to swim in the sea, while Ben and his father, Tom, stay on the yacht fishing. However, something strange happens. As Julian swims, she feels a large, unseen force moving around her. When she pauses and looks around, the water appears calm, but suddenly, something pulls her underwater. Meanwhile, a warning signal goes off on the yacht, but Ben and Tom are too engrossed in fishing to notice. As Julian struggles to stay afloat, she repeatedly calls out for Tom, but no one hears her. Just as the situation becomes dire, Julian feels as if the water is pulling her backward. Fortunately, Tom notices her drifting away from the yacht and jumps into the water to rescue her. Ben starts the yacht engine and manages to pull them closer. Tom saves Julian from drowning, and together with Ben and Cassie, they bring her back on board, rushing to ensure her safety. Once back on the yacht, Tom scolds them for not paying attention to Julian. He reminds them of the warning they had discussed earlier about staying vigilant when someone goes swimming. If they hadn't acted quickly, Julian could have died, and Cassie could have drowned as well. After apologizing, they try to shake off the incident and focus on celebrating Ben's birthday that night. However, Cassie gets a worrying call from her boyfriend, who informs her about a violent storm heading towards the city. Cassie becomes concerned since they are far from a safe area. She informs her parents, and they decide to check the yacht's safety features. As they do, they notice the yacht being rocked by whales and sharks. Tom explains that such behavior from marine creatures typically happens before a storm, as they sense the upcoming turbulence. Understanding the danger of the approaching storm, they realize they must also deal with the sharks. Just as they discuss the situation, the yacht suddenly jolts from a powerful impact. Tom dives into the water to investigate and discovers a massive dent on the yacht, likely caused by a shark. When he returns, he is badly injured. Julian tends to his wounds, and Tom delivers some grim news. The damage is too severe for the yacht to continue its journey. The only option is to call for help, but the signals are down, and the radio isn't picking up any transmission. Stranded and with limited resources, Tom checks their food and water supply. They only have enough water to last for 4 days, and no other provisions. Still, Tom remains somewhat hopeful because they are on a known shipping route, and ships frequently pass through this area. As they continue talking, a sudden loud noise interrupts their conversation. Rushing outside, they see a massive Metroid heading towards them. Tom quickly starts the yacht's engine, knowing full well that this decision will likely destroy the ship. Sure enough, the engine is destroyed in the impact, and from a distance, another Metroid is now heading straight for them. With no other options left, they rush to the lower deck of the yacht, putting on life jackets for safety. Moments later, a deafening crash is heard, and they all lose consciousness. When they regain their senses, they're alive but injured, and to their shock, despite a large hole in the yacht, there's no water inside. Tom and Ben venture outside to assess the damage, only to find their yacht stranded on a rocky terrain. The landscape has drastically changed. The once water-filled area is now covered in massive mud mountains. Tom pulls out his compass and realizes that the very ground beneath them has shifted. The poles of the Earth have completely swapped positions. The North Pole is now where the South Pole used to be, and vice versa. As if that weren't strange enough, the sea has disappeared, replaced by a vast lake. The realization stuns everyone. Tom, in his calm but grave manner, states that in the process, humanity itself must have perished. This news is too much for Jessica, who is so overwhelmed that she collapses and locks herself in a cabin, refusing to speak to anyone. Meanwhile, Julian starts gathering the remaining food supplies, and Ben releases the balloons from his birthday party, hoping that if anyone is alive, they might spot them and come to their rescue. Tom, however, isn't giving up. He turns to the yacht's radio, hoping for contact. To everyone's surprise, someone responds. It's a captain in a small submarine who, like Tom and his family, survived the strange catastrophe. He reveals that he too had witnessed the strange shifting of the seas, explaining how he came to be in the submarine when everything changed. He knows exactly what happened to the world, offering a glimmer of hope for their survival. The captain tells Tom that the Earth's poles have shifted and will return to their normal positions in about a week. When they do, the sea will also return to its original state, and the waves will be extremely dangerous. To survive, the captain advises Tom to find a sheltered spot. Julian, hearing this, quickly instructs her children to pack. Meanwhile, Tom pleads with the captain to take the children aboard his submarine, as he believes it offers the best chance of survival. The captain regrets that he can't, as his submarine is too small to accommodate more than one person. He reveals that he's stranded there and can only take himself to safety. Desperate, Tom offers to help the captain in any way possible if he allows the children to board. After a moment, the captain agrees, and Tom estimates that they will reach the submarine in 2 days, just before the sea's waves return. The family prepares to leave the next morning. However, as Tom scans the area, he notices a strange man walking with his dog in the distance. The man looks injured, so Tom decides to help him, offering him water. But when the man drinks, instead of thanking Tom, he suddenly attacks him. Julian, witnessing this from afar, watches in horror as the man stabs Tom with a dagger, fatally wounding him. She is unable to save her husband. In a state of shock, but determined to protect her children, Julian rushes back to the yacht, urgently warning them of the danger. She hides them in a cabin and gives Cassie a flare gun, telling her to only fire it when it's absolutely necessary. But just as Julian finishes her warning, the killer approaches the cabin door. To protect her children, she quietly moves to a bathroom, where she tends to her injuries. Meanwhile, the killer begins to scour the yacht for food, and Julian, exhausted from hunger, quickly devours some provisions. When the killer finds the cabin empty, he realizes that Julian must have escaped through a hole in the boat. Unfortunately for her, the killer's dog sees her and starts barking. In a desperate attempt to silence it, Julian kills the dog and hides beneath the boat. The killer doesn't immediately find her, but when he spots the dog in the distance, he figures out that Julian is on the move. As soon as the killer steps off the boat to hunt Julian down, she seizes the opportunity to slip back into the boat through a broken glass from the other side. Unfortunately, her luck runs out quickly, as the killer soon catches up with her. He grabs her by the arms and begins to brutally torture her, strangling her. But Julian doesn't give up without a fight. She struggles to free herself. From the cabin, Cassie watches the horrific scene unfold and realizes that now is the time to use the flare gun. She fires it, but the flare does little to harm the killer. However, it causes the yacht to catch fire. Julian, seizing the moment, grabs her children and rushes off the yacht, but the killer isn't far behind. As he attacks again, Julian kicks him away with all her strength, freeing herself once more. As they escape, Cassie and Ben are overcome with grief, crying over the body of their father. Ben, filled with guilt, believes it's all his fault. If only he hadn't let go of the colorful balloons, the killer wouldn't have seen them. In her sorrow, Julian sobs next to her husband's body, but then she notices the killer emerging from the burning yacht. It's clear they can't stay there any longer. Julian quickly gathers her children and flees. They run, exhausted, until they stop behind a hill to rest, unaware that the killer is still on their tail. Ben continues to cry, and Cassie tries to comfort him, offering him a little water. But Ben refuses to drink, unable to shake the weight of what has happened. As they rest, Julian looks around and realizes the killer is still pursuing them. In a panic, they start running again, exhausted but desperate to escape. Every time they look back, the killer is still behind them, closing in. They push on, determined not to stop, and eventually reach a treacherous area filled with poisonous water. Julian warns the children to move quickly, as the danger is immense. As soon as they pass the poisonous waters, Ben's condition worsens. Julian realizes he's severely dehydrated, and in that moment, she remembers the last drop of water she had given him, her final hope for keeping him alive. With so little water left, Julian knew it wasn't enough to sustain them. At this point, Cassie completely lost hope. She had come to terms with the idea that they might not survive, accepting their fate. She urged her mother to accept it too. But Julian, ever determined, refused to give up. She told Cassie, "Do as I say, we will keep moving. I know I can save you." With renewed resolve, Julian encouraged her children to press on. A little further ahead, they spotted a crashed plane, likely downed in the sea years ago. The family took shelter inside the wreckage. Inside, Julian found a photo of her family, taken just the night before. Staring at the photo, the memories of Tom flooded back, and for a moment, they all remembered him, feeling the weight of his absence. The night grew late, and exhausted, Cassie and Ben fell asleep. But Julian, unable to rest, wandered out of the plane, filled with anxiety. To her horror, she realized that, even in the dead of night, the killer was still pursuing them. He had found them. Julian quickly feigned sleep, waiting for the right moment. As the killer neared, she sprang into action, attacking him with fierce determination. In a struggle, Julian managed to fatally stab the killer, removing the threat once and for all. Exhausted but relieved, she finally allowed herself to rest peacefully. The next morning, when the children woke up, they saw the killer's body, now in a gruesome state. The sight was a grim reminder of how dangerous the sea had become. With the danger behind them, they turned their focus to the submarine and the captain who awaited them. While Julian checked the map, Ben, desperate from thirst, wandered off and began drinking from a nearby pond. Julian had warned him not to drink from it, as it was toxic, but Ben's thirst overpowered his judgment. Despite his mother's warning, he continued to drink. Julian quickly rushed over, forcefully pulling his head away from the poisonous water. Unfortunately, the damage was done. Ben had become sick from drinking it. Julian and Cassie managed to set up a temporary shelter for Ben, hoping to give him some rest and relief. But as they tried to find a moment of peace, Julian started hearing strange, unsettling noises. Stepping outside to investigate, she was horrified to see a massive swarm of crabs heading straight for them. In a panic, they fled, running as fast as they could. In the distance, they spotted a large cargo ship, its towering containers offering a potential refuge. As they approached, they noticed people hiding inside the containers, seeing the trio and quickly locking themselves in. Desperate for help, Julian knocked on the container door, pleading for assistance. But the storm of crabs was closing in, and in a rush to escape, Ben and Cassie scrambled up to the top of a container. Julian followed, but as she climbed, one of the crabs managed to bite her leg. With determination, Julian removed the crab and tied her injured leg with a scarf, but the pain was too much, and she collapsed, fainting. Meanwhile, Ben and Cassie watched in horror as the crabs began cutting into the container they had hidden in. The crabs attacked the people inside with savage force. Those who had weapons tried to fight back, killing as many crabs as they could, but the creatures kept coming, relentless and overwhelming. As morning broke, Julian regained consciousness, only to find that both of her children were missing. Fear gripped her heart. The place was so dangerous that losing them felt like an inevitability. She cried out, terrified at the thought of losing them, but just as her hopes seemed to fade, she saw Ben and Cassie approaching from the distance. They had gone in search of food and weapons, and fortunately, the crabs had moved on, no longer a threat in the area. Julian's heart lifted with relief. She tended to her wound while Ben checked over the weapons they had collected. In that moment, Julian used the radio to contact the captain, who informed her that the sea creatures had attacked him as well. He was severely injured and no longer able to assist them. He also revealed that the sea would soon return to its normal state, which explained the creatures' sudden aggression. Without a map, the captain was lost, and he couldn't guide them anymore. In his desperation, he fired a flare gun into the air, and Ben, spotting it, pointed them in the right direction. The family knew they had to move quickly to reach the submarine before it was too late. After a long and exhausting journey, they finally saw a small yellow submarine on the horizon. But reaching it wasn't going to be easy. To get to the submarine, they would have to cross a toxic wasteland, an area so dangerous that simply passing through could make them sick. The stakes were higher than ever. Amid the tension, Cassie, frustrated and scared, began blaming Julian. She accused her mother of failing to save them, unable to understand the severity of the situation. A tense argument broke out between Julian and Cassie, with Cassie accusing her mother of failing to keep the family safe. Julian scolded her, urging her to focus on the mission. Realizing they had no time to waste, Cassie reluctantly agreed, and they continued their journey. However, fate had more challenges in store for them. As they walked, they encountered a dangerous area between the mountains, where the ground gave way. Julian, who was trailing behind, slipped and fell onto a massive rock, becoming stuck. Cassie hesitated, unwilling to leave her mother behind. But Julian, through gritted teeth, insisted that Cassie must take her brother and move forward. She needed to save Ben, no matter the cost. With tears in her eyes, Cassie agreed, and they moved on. When they finally reached the submarine, their hopes were dashed. It was empty. They knocked desperately on the door, but it was the captain who appeared from behind, severely injured. He told them there was no hope for him now, but that the submarine could only accommodate 3 people. Cassie immediately turned back, her mind set on saving her mother. Meanwhile, Julian was fighting off crabs that had swarmed around her, her ammunition running out quickly. As she struggled, Cassie arrived just in time, pulling her mother free from the crab's grasp. With renewed strength, they both ran toward the submarine, knowing they couldn't waste another moment. Inside the submarine, they secured their belts as the door closed behind them. But their relief was short-lived. Through the small porthole, they saw a massive wave approaching. The sea crashed into the submarine with terrifying force, knocking them unconscious. When Julian regained consciousness, she was shocked to see that the submarine was no longer in the water. Instead, it had been dragged by the wave into a ruined city. It was an eerie sight, this once thriving place now reduced to a ghost town. Julian's heart sank as she realized the truth. No one was left alive, except for her and her children. And so, their harrowing journey came to a tragic and unsettling end. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more movie recaps like this. Feel free to leave a comment below if you'd like us to cover one of your favorite films. Until next time, take care and stay tuned.